Hello everyone, Sam Kargus here, and I have another game music design video for you today. Today I want to be talking about how we as music designers or game music composers can make our music go the farthest, and a maximum amount of musical variation. So I'm going to go through this process and how I wrote it and how I used Wwise to create much more value in our game music than just putting our music on loop. And the more musical variation we can add at runtime, help the value go farther with the players playing the game. So I'm going to show you a process that I came up with to develop more musical variation. So I did a recording of the Wwise session, and I posted it on YouTube. It's about an hour long. If you feel like hearing this musical system in a longer context. One thing to bear in mind with this musical system I'm about to show you is I don't think this is going to be appropriate for every project. If you have more of an open world project or any kind of project where you don't know how long players are going to be hanging around for, maybe the campaign is upwards of 100 hours, and you don't feel like, shipping 50 hours of music in your project, this system is going to be very appropriate. If you're doing a narrative driven game where all the musical cues are very, very specific to the particular scenes, then this approach probably won't be warranted. But if you're doing open world games, this is a very effective way of getting a lot more out of your music. All right, so here is the score for today's demo. The letters on the left-hand side represent the different musical instances of the same structure, which is 10 bars long. You can think of this score as like a matrix, where each time it goes through the form, it picks a random bar. So just to give you an example here of an instantiation of the system. The first 4 bars have relatively slower surface rhythms, so you see that there are no musical notes that are smaller than 8 notes. And then in bars 5 and 6, after the repeats are done, you start to see surface rhythms of 16th notes, just to make it feel like it's going somewhere. And that somewhere is the cadence in bar 7. Letters A, B, E, and F all have cadences that are 2 bars long, so only bars 7 and 8 have a 2-bar cadence in those systems. Systems C and D have 4-bar cadences. We call them extended cadential progressions. Bars 9 and 10 in systems A, B, E, and F are post-cadential extensions, so you'll outline them here. These are just elaborations of tonic. There's scale degree 1 is just droning in the bass, as you can see here. So there's pedal 6/4s and other kind of plagal motions just to elaborate tonic. And these post-cadential extensions don't always occur in the form. And I'll show how that works in the Wwise project in a couple minutes. Stacking the different musical instances on top of each other in the same score like this allows us to easily see the voice leading between each bar and helps keep these letter instances in line with the form that we're going for. So going a little bit deeper into the score now, this is a 4-voice score. In the Wwise project, you'll see that I'm labeling music segments as either soprano, alto, tenor, or bass. I'm using those terms in the abstract. They're not vocal. This isn't a vocal score. The soprano and alto are pan drums, and the tenor is a really cool percussion instrument called a Morpheus. It kind of sounds like a vibraphone, but it's a little bit different. And then the bass voice is a kalimba and a bass synthesizer to give it some low end. On top of creating formal variation through this abstract 10-bar structure, I'm also creating variation through the orchestration by mixing and matching the combination of voices that the listener hears at any particular time. This creates like a spontaneous interplay between voices, resulting in anything from call and response, where you'll hear the soprano one time in bar 1, and then maybe you hear the bass in bar 2, and then maybe you hear the tenor in bar 3, and then maybe you hear all the voices in bar 4. So there's a mixing and matching that goes through as we go through the form. This process results in varying degrees of musical density, which really helps leave space for other things in the mix, like dialogue and sound effects. So since we can hear any voice and any combination of voices in each system, there's about 16 permutations of variations you can hear just for one single bar and one single spot on this musical matrix. And then we times that by 6 because there are 6 different musical systems. So 16 times 6 is 96. So just in the first bar, we have 96 different variations that the music can unfold into. And then once we multiply that to other bars, we are dealing with hundreds of variations from just 60 bars of music. I wrote this score in a contrapuntal style, which creates a high degree of independence between each voice, as well as keeps it in its own range, which creates consistency as random bars get chosen between as we go through the form. This would be downplayed if all the parts were harmonized in parallel 6 or thirds, or if you want to make your theory teacher sad, parallel fifths. All the voices are moving independent with one another in different directions and differing intervals to help realize the variation in the system, and this contrapuntal independence is part of that. So if you're recording live musicians on your project and you want to use this type of approach, you will have to be wary because I'm segmenting every bar like this. You'll have to be wary of leaving a bar of rest in your score. That's crucial because you want to make sure your reverb tail is intact, and we should be able to recreate reverb tails as music editors when required. But if we can always save ourselves a bit of work, that's always a good idea. And it will never sound as natural as the recording in the space. It's really hard to recreate that, even though we should be able to. And two, with lots of instruments, especially, anything acoustic, is going to have a particular resonance to it. Especially if you think about cellos and double basses, they have a certain resonance, because they're very large. They have a resonance to them even after the note is played, and you kind of want to capture that as well, which is why you want to leave space in your score for these pauses. All right, so let's jump into the project in Wwise and see how I actually implemented this system. So the first thing I did was export all the individual tracks. I didn't want to, because there's 16 permutations for each bar, doing an individual mix for each of those permutations would take up a lot more memory than exporting each of the individual files and then mixing them in Wwise. And I had to add just a slight compressor to the music mix bus in Wwise, just to get them to glue together a little bit. But it does save on a lot of memory. So it's definitely a wise idea to do that. And then once I exported all these tracks out, I put them into their own music segment. And they're labeled here, A1, A2, and so on and so forth. And this corresponds to the score musical matrix that we saw earlier. Just to keep things organized, it's good to be able to look at this music segment and be able to relate that to the score right away. It'll help keep your brain less foggy. Let's put it that way. So after I set the exit cue and put all the individual tracks on in one music segment, I copied that music segment 4 other times, and then I made one of the voices like the solo voice. So meaning it's always going to sound when that music segment is playing. And then all the other voices get put onto a random step track with basically a silence track. And that's how I'm achieving the kind of varying sparseness and orchestration, is by just putting nothing in one of the random step tracks. This would be fairly easy if you wanted a more sparse orchestration. It'd be fairly easy to just add more silence tracks in here on these random step tracks to give you a more sparse orchestration if that's what you're after. So it's easy enough to expand later if needed. So I did that with all the bars on our musical matrix. It was quite a bit of work, but it's definitely worth it as far as the musical variation goes. And then once I created all these music segments, I put them into one giant music playlist. And I highly suggest that you set up this music playlist logic first. This music playlist gets quite long with all the music segments inside it. So if you set this logic up first and then drag these music segments in. So this music playlist corresponds to the 10-bar like abstract form I was talking about before. That's the beauty of the system, is you can kind of mix and match. If you find a part that works with another part, you can kind of mix and match it and throw it in a random bar if you want. So you can really, because I exported all the individual tracks, you can really expand on the system and add in stuff on the fly if you feel like something is going to work somewhere, and provide even more variation. The first 4 bars, and then this music playlist eventually gets to bar 5. And what I did with bar 5 and 6 is I actually made them so they kind of repeat them within themselves a random amount of times to give the phrase length a bit of that way it wasn't always 8 bars or always 10 bars long. So the latter part of the form will have some slightly varying lengths to it, which helps gives even more variation to the system. Okay, and now we're at the cadence section here. I didn't segment the cadences per bar like I did with the other measures, just because the cadences have a drive to them, and segmenting them per bar and mixing and matching them in the same way that I'm doing with the other bars, you lose the drive to the tonic in the cadences. So I decided to keep the cadences in their 2 and 4 bar forms. And as I mentioned with the post-cadential extensions, they don't always occur. So at the end of this music playlist here, there's a random step group that contains another random step group for the cadences that don't come before some post-cadential extensions. They just go right back to the beginning. And then it will randomize between this random step group and then this sequence continuous group, which will iterate the cadence and also iterate the post-cadential extension before going to the beginning of the piece. Thank you for watching this video on maximizing musical variation. Considering how expensive game development is getting, the farther we can make our music go as music designers, the more value we can add to a project. All right, until next time, I hope you have a great day.